My name is Camille Harlow. I'm 29 years old, and the woman who just died basically raised me. My parents' divorce, when I was 9, had been the kind that leaves scorch marks on furniture and memory. My grandmother's tiny house was the only place that didn't feel like a war zone. She packed my lunches, came to every school play, slipped $20 bills in cards with too many exclamation points. She called me my girl in a way that made it sound like a promise. Now my mom was saying words like peaceful and in her sleep, and she didn't suffer, and my mind kept stuttering on a single fact. My person was gone. "I'll come over," I heard myself say. I'll handle it. The arrangements. I'm the executor, remember?" "I know, honey," Mom's voice broke. "I'm so glad she trusted you with that. She swallowed audibly. "Can you call Owen?" I can't say it again. "Yeah," I whispered. "I'll call him." We hung up. I stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, counting the hairline cracks in the paint like it was a test I could pass if I just focused hard enough. Then I rolled onto my side and opened my messages. Owen and I had been together 3 years, engaged for 6 months. He was 27, charming in that big smile, big plans way, with a talent for turning every dinner into a brainstorming session about our future. He liked talking about the companies he'd start, the real estate we'd own, the vacations we'd take. I liked the feeling of being chosen, of having someone say we, like it was a given. I hit call. He picked up on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Hey babe, everything okay?" "My grandmother died this morning." The words felt too blunt, but anything softer would have broken me. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for my heart to register it. "Oh," he said. "Wow, when?" "A few hours ago. Mom just called." My throat tightened. "I have to go over there, and I'll need to arrange the funeral, the will, all of it." Another pause. "Okay, when's the funeral?" "I don't know yet," I said, staring at the digital clock blinking 6:45. She literally just passed. Probably this weekend. Saturday, maybe Sunday. "This weekend, like Saturday or Sunday?" He sounded more awake now. "Because I've got plans, you know that, right?" A tiny cold knot formed in my stomach. "What plans?" "The festival," he said, like it should be obvious. Camfest. I bought those tickets months ago. They're non-refundable. Right. The 3-day music festival, the one he'd called our last big blowout before we get serious with wedding savings. I'd told him I couldn't take the full weekend off work. Quarter end close at my accounting firm had me buried. He'd shrugged and said, "No worries, I'll go with the guys." "Camille?" he prompted when I went quiet. "I need to go," I said. "I'll text you when I know more." "Okay, babe, call me later," he said, and hung up. I lay there for another 30 seconds, then swung my legs out of bed and started the list in my head. Funeral home, obituary, flowers, catering, guests, death certificates, the practical choreography of grief. Competence doesn't stop just because your heart does. By 2 p.m., I knew more. I'd spent the morning in a beige carpeted office at the funeral home, nodding as someone in a navy blazer slid price lists across the desk. Decisions that felt both enormous and insultingly transactional. Casket or cremation, lilies or roses, morning or afternoon. We settled on Saturday at 11:00 a.m., the earliest slot where out-of-town cousins could make flights. Grandma had always been the first one to arrive anywhere. She'd have appreciated the promptness. Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, paperwork spread around me like a paper graveyard. My hands moved almost automatically. Emails to relatives, calls to family friends, a group text to the book club Grandma had adored. Finally, I opened my messages with Owen and typed, "Funeral is Saturday at 11 a.m. I'll send you the address." I hit send, then watched the little delivered notification appear. The microwave clock clicked from 1:59 to 2 high. He didn't reply. I made coffee I didn't really want, answered another call from my mom, triple-checked the obituary draft. I refreshed my email, my messages, the funeral home portal. At 5:18 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Owen. So I can't make Saturday. My Camfest weekend pass was $850 and it's non-refundable. Your grandma would totally understand. She'd want me to enjoy life. I'll light a candle for her at the festival. Sorry, babe." I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. My grandmother, the woman who'd taught me how to drive by circling the empty church parking lot at dusk, who'd paid for my first semester textbooks when my dad forgot, who'd shown up to every small, silly milestone in my life like it was the Olympics, was gone. And my fiancé was choosing a music festival over saying goodbye because the tickets were non-refundable. Somewhere under the grief, something very quiet snapped. I stared at the screen until the edges of my vision blurred, then typed 2 words. Understood. My thumb hovered over the send button for a heartbeat. Then I tapped it. Almost immediately, the 3 dots appeared. Owen, OMG, thank you for being so chill about this. I knew you'd get it. Love you. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and logged into the secure portal for my grandmother's estate. She hadn't been rich, but she'd been careful. After selling her little house and paying off a few lingering medical bills, the estate came to around $180,000. Most of it was split between my mother and my uncle. But there was a special clause, one I'd skimmed over months ago when she first showed me the will. To my beloved granddaughter and her husband-to-be, it read, I leave $40,000 to help them start their married life together. At the time, Grandma had winked when I read it aloud. You and that boyfriend of yours will put it to good use, I'm sure. I'd blushed and said, if we get that far. She'd just patted my hand. You've always known right from wrong, my girl. I trust your judgment. Now, sitting alone at my kitchen table with Owen's text still glowing on my phone, those words felt heavier. I scrolled down to the section labeled, Executor, Camille Harlow. That was me. As executor, I had certain responsibilities and certain discretion. We weren't married. We wouldn't be married before the estate closed. That process took months. The clause said husband-to-be, but didn't name Owen specifically. And there was that line in the legal notes about conditional bequests reverting if the condition wasn't met. My grief-strained brain didn't want to think about money, but it also knew that ignoring details had never protected me from anything. I clicked on my contacts and dialed Ms. Patel, my grandmother's estate attorney. She picked up on the second ring. Camille, I was just about to call you. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. Thank you, I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. I had a question about the will. Of course. The clause about the $40,000. It says it's for my granddaughter and her husband-to-be. My voice wobbled slightly on the word husband. I cleared my throat. What happens if I'm not married when the estate is distributed? There was a small pause, then paper rustling. Well, she said, because it's conditional on you being married, if you're not married at the time of distribution, that bequest reverts to the main estate. You'd still receive your share as the primary beneficiary, but there would be no separate spouse or fiancé share. As executor, you document the circumstances and your decision. So, if I called off my engagement tomorrow, my heart pounded harder at saying it out loud than it had at thinking it. There would be no legal claim from my ex-fiancé? Correct, she said. He's not named in the will. He has no standing. The law is very clear on that. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. How long until distribution? 4 to 5 months, typically. Plenty of time. Why? Just timeline questions, I said. I'm trying to understand my responsibilities. You're doing exactly what your grandmother hoped you would, Ms. Patel said gently, asking the right questions, taking it seriously. After we hung up, I set my phone down next to my laptop and just sat there. The grief was still there, heavy and raw, but layered beneath it now was something else, a thin, steely thread of clarity. I opened a notes app and typed, Owen, text, Thursday 5:18 p.m. So I can't make Saturday. My CamFest weekend pass was $850, and it's non-refundable. Your grandma would totally understand. She'd want me to enjoy life. I'll light a candle for her at the festival. I took a screenshot of the message thread and saved it to a folder labeled Estate Documentation. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew this much. My grandmother had spent her whole life showing up, and I had just watched the man I was supposed to marry choose a concert over her funeral. Some things, once seen, don't go back into the dark. Saturday morning, the sky finally decided on rain. Not a dramatic downpour, just a steady, gray drizzle that slicked the streets and made everything smell like wet concrete and cut grass. The kind of weather where umbrellas bump into each other and everyone speaks a little quieter. It felt appropriate. The funeral home chapel filled up in slow motion. Old neighbors, people from Grandma's church, women from her book club with purses that could double as carry-ons, my uncle and aunt, their kids, my mom in a black dress that looked like it had belonged to someone older, shoulders hunched as if the weight of grief had a physical hand on her. My job, as always, was to move. Check with the funeral director. Confirm the music. Make sure the framed photo of Grandma, the one where she's laughing at something off camera, is set on the easel instead of the stiff studio portrait she hated. Hug people. Accept casseroles. Nod at stories I'd heard a dozen times. Every time the chapel doors opened, I glanced over, a small, traitorous part of me, still expecting to see Owen walk in late, hair damp from the rain, expression sorry and earnest. He never did. "Where's your fiancé?" my aunt asked at first, whispering as we stood in the hallway waiting for the service to start. "He couldn't make it," I said. "Oh," she blinked. "Work?" I thought of the text. My CamFest weekend pass was $850 and it's non-refundable. "Something like that," I said. Later, one of Grandma's bridge partners squeezed my hands, her perfume a cloud of powder and violets. "Is Owen parking the car?" "No," I said. "He's not able to be here today." A flicker of confusion crossed her face, quickly masked by polite sympathy. "Well, you know who's in your corner, dear. That's what matters." 120 people came to say goodbye. The service blurred together. Hymns, tissue-wrapped sniffles, the pastor's carefully balanced words about a life well lived. I remember the feel of my mother's arm linked through mine, my uncle's voice cracking as he read a letter Grandma had written years ago, "For whenever I go." I remember staring at the casket and thinking she hated closed lids on anything. She'd be furious about this box. Every so often, as people stepped up to tell stories, a recipe she'd shared, a ride she'd given, a bill she'd quietly paid, I felt the empty space beside me like a separate presence, a phantom shape where my fiancé should have been. After the service, at the cemetery, the rain eased to a mist. We clustered under a tent, watching the casket lower, the ropes creaking softly. My mom's tears were silent, almost dazed. I held her hand and pretended my vision was blurred from the weather. Grandma's best friend, a tiny woman named Lorraine with bright red lipstick and a cane covered in stickers, shuffled up to me when the crowd started to thin. She wrapped both of her hands around my wrist. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was iron. "Baby girl," she said, her eyes sharp behind smudged glasses. "Where's that young man of yours?" "At a music festival," I said before I could soften it. Lorraine stared at me for a long beat. The rain ticking on the tent sounded louder. "Well," she said finally, voice low, "if he's not here for this, he won't be there for anything." The words went in like a needle, small and precise. I swallowed. "I think I know that now." She patted my hand. "Your grandmother saw people clearly. Don't you forget. You got that from her." By the time we got back to my mom's house for the post-funeral food spread, my phone had already stacked up with messages. Coworkers, distant cousins, acquaintances who had seen the obituary online. There was only one thread I didn't open. I stayed until late afternoon, helped rinse dishes, moved folding chairs back to the garage, wrapped leftovers in foil. Mom kept circling back to me, like she was afraid I'd vanish. "You sure you don't want to stay here tonight?" she asked for the third time. "I need to feed the cat," I lied. I didn't have a cat. I just needed to go home to the quiet my grandmother had always honored. The kind where nobody asked you anything until you had words again. When I finally walked into my apartment, it was close to 3:00 p.m. The place smelled faintly of the coffee I'd poured and abandoned 2 days earlier. The lamp was still on in the corner. I'd left the light on for a woman who would never walk through my door again. I set my keys down, kicked off my shoes, and only then picked up my phone. 32 unread messages from Owen. At first, they were neutral. "How did it go? I'm sure it was beautiful. Miss you, babe." Then, "My mom was asking about the inheritance, lol. How much are we getting exactly? Because I found this insane venue with a waterfall and it's like $45K, but with your grandma's money, we can totally swing it. Can you confirm the amount so I can put down a deposit?" I stared at that last one for a full 30 seconds. My grandmother had been in the ground for 4 hours, and he was already spending money she'd left in a will he'd never read. The exhaustion hit me like a wave. Grief, anger, and a deep, bone-level disappointment I couldn't even name yet. I set the phone face down on the counter, ordered a pizza I'd probably eat 2 slices of, and crawled into bed with my clothes still on. I slept for 12 straight hours. When my door unlocked itself the next evening, I knew it was Owen before I rolled off the couch. He still had a key. "Babe," he called, breezing in with the familiarity of someone who believes that doors exist only to be walked through. "Cam, where are you?" I stood in the doorway to the living room. He turned, grinning, arms already half open. He was tanned, sun-kissed, wearing a faded festival t-shirt and a wristful of plastic bands like trophies. Hey, he said, stepping toward me. God, I missed you. I'm so sorry. I didn't move into his hug. He faltered, arms dropping a fraction. What's wrong? I looked at him for a long moment, at the new tan line around his neck from 3 days of sunshine and loud music, at the easy, relaxed posture of someone whose weekend had been fun, not devastating. The funeral was yesterday, I said, in case you forgot. His jaw tightened. I didn't forget. We already talked about this. Did we? My voice sounded strange even to me. Too calm. Because what I remember is you texting that your tickets were non-refundable and my grandmother would totally understand if you skipped her funeral. He rolled his eyes, a tiny, impatient flick. Camille, come on, you said you understood. I said understood, I corrected. That's not the same thing. He huffed out a breath and flopped onto the couch like we were starting some recurring argument about dishes, not the basic decency of showing up when someone dies. Look, he said, I know how much she meant to you. I do. But losing almost $900 on top of everything else, that would have been stupid. You told me yourself we need to be smarter about money if we want the house, the wedding, all of it. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You think the issue here is financial strategy? It's part of it, he said. Your grandma was a free spirit. She always said, live life to the fullest. She would have wanted me to go. I felt something inside me go utterly still. Don't tell me what my grandmother would have wanted, I said quietly. He blinked as if I'd slapped him. Excuse me? She wanted people to show up, I said. She showed up. For everyone. For me. For you. She called you her grandson, and when it was your turn to show up, you chose, what? EDM and overpriced beer? His ears flushed red. That's not fair. What's unfair is you asking me about waterfall venues 4 hours after we buried her. His expression snapped from defensive hurt to annoyance. So this is about the money now. I stared at him. It's about the fact that my grandmother is dead, and you couldn't give up one weekend to stand next to me, and then you treated her estate like an ATM. You're being dramatic, he said. It was one funeral. I lost real money if I didn't go, okay? I work hard for that money. She's gone either way. Me standing in a suit doesn't change that. The casual cruelty of it made my chest ache. So that's your line? I asked. She's dead, so why bother? He threw his hands up. I'm just being realistic. You're the one turning this into some moral test. I took a breath, then another. In my mind, I could see Grandma's handwriting, looping and precise. I trust your judgment. You've always known right from wrong. This was a test, I said. You failed. He scoffed. Over a funeral? Over a funeral, I said. Over empathy. Over priorities. Over the person you claim to want to spend your life with. I stepped back from the couch. Get out, I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. What? Get out of my apartment, I repeated. Leave your key on the counter. He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You can't be serious. Camille, come on. You're in shock. You just lost her. We should be planning, not... We are planning, I said. I'm planning a future that doesn't involve someone who would rather go to CamFest than stand next to me at my grandmother's funeral. His face hardened. The charm drained out of his features, leaving something narrower and meaner. You're really going to throw away 3 years over one weekend? He asked. One weekend? That I already paid for. Yes, I said simply. He stood up slowly. And what about the wedding? The house? The inheritance? There it was. The word he'd been orbiting since he walked in. I met his eyes. What about it? My mother was asking about it, he said, jaw tight. $40,000, right? That's what everyone says. That money was meant for us, for our life. You don't get to pull the plug on everything and keep it like some prize. The bequest was for my husband, I said. We're not married. We won't be married when the estate is distributed. Legally, you're nobody to that money. He took a step toward me, voice rising. So you're just going to steal it? It's not yours to steal, I said. It was never yours. It was my grandmother's gift to the person who shows up and stays. That isn't you. His hands shook. He snatched his key from his pocket and slammed it onto the counter so hard it bounced. You know what? He said. My father is a lawyer. You think you can just cut me out and rewrite what your grandma wanted? He'll call the estate attorney. You'll see how this works in the real world. He grabbed the travel mug he'd brought, flung it toward the sink in a burst of anger. It hit the counter, splashing lukewarm coffee across the backsplash. You're going to regret this, he said. That money is mine. No, I said, it's not, and after this, neither am I. For a flicker of a second, something like panic darted across his face. Then he masked it with a sneer. Enjoy your little moral high ground, he snapped. Hope it keeps you warm in that starter house. If you can even afford one without me. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. In the ringing silence that followed, I realized my hands were shaking. I wiped up the coffee splatter, more out of muscle memory than anything else, then sank onto the stool at the counter. Grief had its own gravity. It pulled everything in. The fight, the empty side of the bed, the echo of Lorraine's voice at the graveside. If he's not here for this, he won't be there for anything. I picked up my phone. A notification pinged at the top of the screen. An email from Ms. Patel confirming the finalized service details. I opened a new note instead and typed, Sunday, 7:43 p.m. Owen left key, threatened legal action over inheritance after skipping funeral. I saved it to the same folder, estate documentation. I hadn't just lost my grandmother and my fiancé in the same week. I'd gained something too, though it hurt to look at directly. Clarity. Monday morning hit like a hammer. I'd slept maybe 4 hours, waking up in loops. Rain on the window, Lorraine's warning, Owen's voice snarling. Enjoy your little moral high ground. Every time my brain drifted toward sleep, it snapped back to the same realization. This wasn't over. At 7:32 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. This is Camille. Ms. Harlow, a crisp male voice replied. This is Attorney Langford. I represent the family of your former fiancé. Of course, Owen's father. My spine straightened automatically, years of accounting professionalism snapping into place. Good morning, Mr. Langford. I'm calling to discuss the inheritance situation. He said the word inheritance like it tasted sour. There is no situation, I said. The bequest is conditional on marriage. We're no longer engaged. He has no claim. Be that as it may, he said. My client's son had certain expectations. Expectations aren't legally binding, I cut in, mimicking the estate attorney's tone from memory. A beat of silence. Then, sharper, we are prepared to argue implied contract, promissory estoppel. With all due respect, I said, you know that's nonsense. Your son skipped my grandmother's funeral to attend a music festival. He forfeited any moral or legal footing. Another silence, a colder one. This isn't the end of this, he said. You'll be hearing from us. I'm sure, I said and hung up. I took a breath, then immediately called Ms. Patel. She picked up on the first ring. Let me guess, Owen's father? Already threatened lawsuits. She snorted softly. He has no standing, but this actually helps. We should formalize an exclusion clause. Given his absence at the funeral, you have documented cause to exclude him from any future claim. I blinked. We can do that? You're the executor, she reminded me. You can request the clause. I'll draft it today. Some of the tension in my chest loosened. Thank you. After I hung up, I allowed myself 1 minute, just one, to stand in my kitchen and breathe. Grief was a weight, but clarity was an edge. By evening, I was exhausted, but calm enough to drive home. Until I saw him. Owen was leaning against the brick wall beside my building's side entrance, hoodie pulled over his head, arms crossed. Not angry. Worse. Waiting. My stomach dropped. He straightened when he saw me. Camille, we need to talk. No, I said immediately. We really don't. I tried to walk past him. He stepped into my path. Please, he said, voice tight. Just hear me out. I crossed my arms. 1 minute. He looked terrible, not unwell, strategic, hair unwashed, eyes rimmed red, like he'd practiced looking broken. I made a mistake, he said. A huge one. I know that now. You went to a festival, I said. That's not a mistake. It's a choice. I know, he said again, louder. I know, Camille, but I was overwhelmed. Work has been hell, and with the wedding and everything, I thought one weekend to decompress wouldn't matter. My jaw clenched. You're not describing grief. You're describing priorities. He winced. You don't understand. He swallowed hard. I quit my job. The air between us flattened. What? He rubbed a hand over his face. 2 weeks ago. I hated it. The hours, the pressure. You know how depressed I've been. No, I thought. I didn't. And I figured, he continued, with your grandma's 40K, I'd have a few months to figure things out. Start fresh. So when you dumped me, I panicked. I don't have anything. No job, no savings, nothing. I stared at him, stunned. You quit your job, I said slowly, because you assumed my grandmother would fund your unemployed gap year? It wasn't like that, he protested. It was for us, for our future. And now you're leaving me with nothing, Camille. Nothing. I shook my head. You chose that. You did that before I broke things off. His eyes glinted with something ugly. Right. And now you want to pretend this isn't partly your fault. You knew how stressed I was. You knew I needed a reset. You needed self-discipline, I said, not my grandmother's money. He stepped closer, too close. You owe me, he whispered. You owe me something. No, I said, I don't. His expression flickered, hurt, melting into anger. Fine, he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. Then I guess people should hear how you're cutting me out of money meant for both of us. He hit record. The red light blinked. Everyone needs to see this, he said loudly. My fiancé, ex-fiancé, stealing my inheritance, refusing to help me after I quit my job for us. You quit your job before I even knew, I said, keeping my voice cold, steady, and you skipped my grandmother's funeral for a music festival. His mouth froze mid-word. That's on the record now, I added. He stopped the recording abruptly. You don't get to spin this, I said. Not to your parents, not to strangers on the internet. You can't shame me for doing what's legally required of me. He exhaled a shaky breath and switched tactics so fast it made my skin crawl. His eyes filled, not with real tears, but practiced ones. Camille, I'm scared, he whispered. I don't have anyone else. I'm alone. Please. I can't do this without you. There was a time, God help me, when this would have cracked me open. Now it just made me tired. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, voice low, but your choices aren't my burden. His expression snapped. You'll regret this, he said. You think you're invincible because you're Executor? You think people won't believe me? No, I said. I think the truth stands, even when you don't. I stepped around him. If you show up again, I said without turning back, I'll file for a restraining order. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched me walk to my door, his silence far more dangerous than his shouting ever was. The next day at 10:14 a.m., security called my desk. Camille, there's a woman here demanding to see you. My stomach sank. Is her last name Langford? A sigh. Yes. I took the elevator down. Owen's mother stood in the lobby, face blotchy, hair wild, clutching her purse in a death grip. The moment she saw me, she launched forward. What did you do to my son? She cried, loud enough to turn heads. He's in pieces. He hasn't slept. He hasn't eaten. You destroyed him. I held up a hand. Ma'am. You stole from him, she shrieked. That money was meant for their life together. Security stepped between us. Ma'am, you need to lower your voice. He quit his job for her, she wailed, and now she's throwing him away like garbage. My coworkers were staring, phones were out. I felt something inside me settle, like a final puzzle piece locking into place. Your son, I said evenly, chose not to attend my grandmother's funeral. He chose to quit his job without telling me. And he chose to weaponize your grief against mine. She gasped, as if I'd hit her. Please leave, one of the guards said, or we will escort you out. You're evil, she screamed. Evil! They escorted her out. My boss called me into his office 20 minutes later. He looked concerned, but also deeply sympathetic. Everything okay? He asked gently. Ex-fiancé drama, I said. It's under control. He nodded. If you need time off, anything, just say the word. Thank you, I said, but I'm okay. And for the first time in days, it wasn't a lie. That evening, as I curled on the couch with leftover soup and the quiet hum of rain outside, my email dinged. Subject. Exclusion clause. Finalized. It was from Ms. Patel. I opened the attached PDF. There it was. The following individual is formally excluded from any claim, present or future, to this estate. Owen Langford. Reason. Failed to attend decedent's funeral services, choosing instead to attend a recreational music festival. Demonstrates fundamental disrespect for the decedent and disqualifies him from any benefit under this will. I didn't smile. I exhaled. Deep and long, like my lungs were finally allowed to fill. 3 weeks later, I received the email. Notice of will reading. All beneficiaries and excluded parties must attend. Excluded parties. That was a phrase I'd never seen outside legal dramas. Now it was the hinge of my life. The reading was scheduled for Wednesday, 2 p.m. Small conference room at Patel and Wexler, attorneys at law. Neutral carpeting. Neutral lighting. Neutral chairs. Nothing about it neutral at all. My mother came with me. My uncle and aunt, too. We filled one side of the long walnut table, 5 chairs, tissues placed discreetly near each coaster. The whole room smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon disinfectant. At 2:04 p.m., the door opened. Owen walked in, flanked by both parents. He wore a conservative navy suit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed. His hair was slicked back, and his expression was an imitation of solemnity, the kind where the sadness sits in the wrong places. His mother's eyes were sharp darts. His father looked composed, smug even, like a man who believed he'd found a loophole. They sat across from us without a single word. A physical divide, family on one side, entitlement on the other. Then the door opened again, and Ms. Patel entered with a stack of folders and a calm, almost serene expression. "Thank you all for coming. I know this has been a difficult time. Let's begin." She started with standard language, legal identifiers, date of the will, verification of her role. Then she moved into bequests. To my daughter. My mother squeezed the tissue and nodded through tears. To my son. My uncle's jaw tightened as he blinked hard. Then, to my beloved granddaughter, Camille Harlow, I leave $40,000, my wedding ring set, and a personal letter to be delivered separately. Owen leaned forward slightly. His mother inhaled sharply. His father showed the tiniest flash of teeth, a victory smile forming too early. Ms. Patel continued. Originally, the will contained a conditional bequest to my granddaughter and her husband-to-be. Owen straightened, preparing for some triumphant reveal. However, Ms. Patel said, flipping a page, as no marriage has occurred and the condition was not met, that bequest reverts to the primary beneficiary. Furthermore, she picked up a second document. The executor has exercised her legal authority to request a formal exclusion of one individual. Silence. You could hear someone swallow. Ms. Patel read clearly, gently, almost compassionately, like she regretted the necessity, but not the truth. Pursuant to Section 7 of this will, the following individual is formally excluded from any claim, present or future, to this estate, Owen Langford. Owen's mouth fell open. No, he said immediately. No, that's what? What does that mean? His father put a warning hand on his forearm, but Owen shook it off. Ms. Patel raised the next page. The reason for exclusion is as follows. The above-named individual failed to attend the decedent's funeral services on date, choosing instead to attend a recreational music festival. When questioned, he stated that attendance was impossible due to non-refundable concert tickets. This demonstrates fundamental disrespect for the decedent and disqualifies him from any benefit under this will. Owen's mother stood so fast her chair scraped. "This is ridiculous. You can't say that. You can't." "Mrs. Langford," Ms. Patel said gently, "please sit. The clause is legally binding." "That money was left to him," she cried. "It was left to my future husband," I said quietly. "We aren't married." "That's semantics," she snapped. "It's the law," Ms. Patel corrected softly. Owen shoved his chair back and stood. "So that's it?" he said, glaring at me. "You rewrote her will to screw me over?" "No," I said. "I enforced her will. There's a difference." "You manipulated the clause," he shouted. "You skipped her funeral," I said. "And when asked about it, you said, and I quote, 'She would have wanted me to enjoy life.'" Everyone looked at him. His face went from red to pale to something like ash. My mother stood slowly, her voice steady but shaking with emotion. "My mother adored you," she said to Owen. "She called you family. And on the day we buried her, when my daughter needed you, you were at a concert. A concert." Owen opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "She was gone," he muttered. "It wouldn't have changed anything." "It would have changed everything," she whispered. "Respect is shown when people show up." My uncle rose, too, tall, steady, a quiet wall of disappointment. "I think," he said, "it's time for you to leave." Owen's father finally stood, straightening his jacket. His voice was icy. "We'll contest this." Ms. Patel actually smiled. "Counselor, you know your son has no standing. He is not named in the will. He is not a spouse. And the executor's documented reasoning is airtight." His father's jaw clenched. Owen's mother let out a choked, furious sob. "This isn't fair," she spat at me. "You ruined his life over one mistake." It hit me, the absurdity of it. "He quit his job," I said calmly, assuming my grandmother's money would support him. That wasn't a mistake. That was entitlement. Owen's face contorted. "I did it for us." I looked at him and saw, finally, fully the truth. He had never imagined a future with me. Only a future funded by me. Ms. Patel closed the folder. "That concludes the reading," she said. It was over. Legally. Emotionally. Finally. The Langfords left first, the door slamming behind them like a punctuation mark. Then my family gathered around me. My mother hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. My uncle squeezed my shoulder. She would be too. I believed him. That night, at home, I opened the sealed envelope Ms. Patel had handed me. It was Grandma's letter. Her handwriting was always recognizable, leaning forward like it was walking toward you. "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be too sad. I had a good run. I'm leaving you money because you've always been smart with it. But more than that, I trust your judgment. If you're married when you read this, wonderful. Build something real. If you're not married, then trust that you made the right choice. You've always known right from wrong. And remember, family is who shows up, not who says they will, who actually does. Love you forever, Grandma, I cried, not from grief, from being seen, from being known. In the weeks that followed, the fallout hit exactly the way people like the Langfords never imagine it will. Owen's father filed a complaint against Ms. Patel, dismissed in 6 days. He tried to contest the will. Judge threw it out in 8 minutes. He filed a personal claim against me, dismissed with costs. Legal bills piled on them, not me. Owen had to move back in with his parents. I heard from mutual friends that the story leaked through town. Small towns don't forget who skipped a funeral, especially not whose funeral. His mother tried to start a GoFundMe for legal injustice. Someone commented, "Didn't he miss the funeral for a music festival?" She deleted it within an hour. Meanwhile, my life opened. I used the $40,000 as a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom house. White brick, tiny rosebush out front, quiet street with a mailman who whistled. I framed Grandma's letter and hung it in the living room. Every Sunday, my mom came over for dinner. We talked, cooked, remembered. It felt like healing. 6 months later, I went on a date with a man named Drew Carter. Not flashy, not dramatic, just kind. On our 3rd date, he asked about my family. I told him everything. The funeral, the inheritance, the breakup, all of it. He didn't flinch. He listened, really listened. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "When did you know your ex wasn't the one?" he asked. "When he chose a concert over a funeral," I said softly. "And when I realized showing up wasn't optional, it was the whole point." Drew smiled, gentle and sincere. "Your grandmother sounds incredible. I would have liked to meet her." "She would have liked you," I said. 3 weeks later, he came to Sunday dinner. 2 months after that, he visited Grandma's grave with me. He brought flowers. He showed up. People sometimes say I was too harsh. That holding $40,000 over someone's head because they skipped a funeral was extreme. But it was never about the money. It was about respect, responsibility, love, presence. My grandmother spent her entire life showing up. For me, for my mom, for her community. She deserved the same in return. Owen had one chance to prove he was that kind of person. He chose a festival. He got what he earned. And I got exactly what she wanted me to have. The means to build a life. And the wisdom to know who deserves to be in it.